Stability Authority. Thank you for your time today. I wanted to acknowledge the enormous tragedy that occurred this past Saturday in our beloved city. 10 lives were senselessly taken from their families, their friends, and from our community, and from all of us. I offer our condolences to all those suffering and in pain, to the community impacted by this tragedy, and to the entire city of Buffalo. Our hearts hurt with yours. At this time, I would like to hold a moment of silence in the memory of those we have lost. Thank you. Our agenda today includes a review of the 2022-2023 budget and the 2023-2026 financial plan for the city and covered organizations as submitted by the mayor to bfsa. We will also review third quarter reports. Let's begin today with a roll call. Jeanette, why don't you do it?
I can do that.
Thank you.
Chair Olson is excused. Vice Chair Jurasek.
Present.
Secretary Floss.
Here?
Director Sanfilippo.
Here.
Mayor Byron Brown.
Here.
County Executive Mark Polenkars.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Our first item of business is to recognize two extraordinary individuals that we have had an amazing opportunity to have worked with over the years. I have a resolution for Jim McGavern, who was lost this past March, and I would like to read make sure I have the right.
I lost you.
Yeah, I'm looking. Hold on. Which one's which? Oh, here we go. Whereas on July 3rd, 2003, the New York State Governor signed into law Chapter 122 of the Law of 2003, known as the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority Act, which created the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority to assist in the restoration of fiscal stability in the city of Buffalo and within its covered organizations. And whereas on September 24th, 2012, and pursuant to resolution number 1231, the BFSA Board of Directors unanimously voted to engage the law firm of McGavern Grimm LLP to provide legal services, noting specifically the ability of Mr. James L. McGavern to meet the unique needs of the BFSA. And whereas Mr. McGavern brought an extensive amount of legal expertise in various municipal areas, both financially and operationally, having served in the past as counsel to the Comptroller of the State of New York, County Attorney, and Assistant Attorney General for the State of New York, among others. And whereas Mr. McGavern, has been honored by various organizations, including being selected by Business First Survey as Best Lawyer in Western New York in Government Negotiations, Lawyer of the Year by the Bar Association of Erie County, and was a recipient of the 2001 Jekyll Award, the highest honor bestowed by the University of Buffalo Law School. And whereas Mr. McGavern's contributions to the community have been enumerated, including serving as president of the Bar Association of Erie County, Chair of the Charter Revision Commission for the City of Buffalo, Vice Chair of the Erie County Charter Revision Committee, member of the New York State Commission on Government Integrity, Chair of the Buffalo State College President's Blue Ribbon Committee on Equity and Diversity, Chairman of the Buffalo Baseball Stadium Design Advisory Committee, Chair of the panel to revise the Code of Ethics for the City of Buffalo, among other roles as member, director, officer of other professional and civic organizations. And whereas Mr. McGavern worked tirelessly to address the needs of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority during the COVID-19 pandemic, assisting to ensure that the City of Buffalo continued to thrive for generations to come. And whereas Mr. McGavern's continued to provide invaluable advice to the BFSA until his passing on March 7th, 2022. And whereas Mr. McGavern's contributions to the community, the City of Buffalo, and the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority will endure and positively impact future generations of the City of Buffalo. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority does hereby honor and appreciate Mr. James L. McGavern, Esquire, for his outstanding contributions to the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority, the City of Buffalo, the Buffalo City School District, the Buffalo Municipal Housing Authority, the Buffalo Urban Renewal Agency, and the entire Western New York community. I would ask for a vote. All those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. It passes. The second resolution is to honor Donna Estridge. Donna announced her retirement, and we congratulate her and wish her the very best in all of her new endeavors. I have a resolution for Donna that I would like to read. And thank you, Donna, for actually coming today. I appreciate that. So, whereas on July 3rd, 2003, the New York State Governor signed into law Chapter 122 of the Law of 2003, known as the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority Act, which created the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority to assist in the restoration of fiscal stability in the City of Buffalo and within its covered organizations. And whereas the Honorable Byron W. Brown was sworn in as the City of Buffalo's 62nd mayor on January 2006, and whereas Mayor Byron Brown announced the appointment to the City of Buffalo Budget Director Donna J. Estridge as City of Buffalo Commissioner of Administration, Finance, Policy, and Urban Affairs in January 2013, noting his commitment towards hiring the best and the brightest to the city administration. And whereas the Buffalo Common Council unanimously approved Ms. Estridge's appointment on January 8th, 2013. And whereas during Ms. Estridge's distinguished 28-year career in public service, she served in several senior positions, including audit inspector, budget analyst, principal management analyst, and as the director of budget, administration, and finance, among others, and developed an extensive amount of municipal finance expertise. And whereas Ms. Estridge's extensive budget and fiscal management experience provided an immeasurable asset in the performance of her duties as commissioner and as a board member in various city-related organizations, including the Buffalo Erie Niagara Land Improvement Corporation, the Buffalo Municipal Water Finance Committee, the Buffalo Water Board, and the Buffalo Urban Renewal Agency. And whereas Ms. Estridge's dedication to the community of the City of Buffalo extended to involvement in various organizations, including Shays Spotlight Committee, the Westminster Presbyterian Church, where she served as chair of their finance committee, was a member of the Handbell Chorus and Garden Committee, and also served as an elder, and as a member of the Ladies Golf League of Delaware Park. And whereas Ms. Estridge was designated to represent Mayor Byron Brown at meetings for the BFSA, and whereas Ms. Estridge has announced her retirement from the City of Buffalo, but her contributions to the community will undoubtedly continue, along with the enduring impact her actions have had on the City of Buffalo, the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority, and future generations of the City of Buffalo. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority does hereby honor and appreciate Ms. Donald J. Estridge for her outstanding contributions to the City of Buffalo, the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority, and the entire Western New York community. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
It's opposed unanimously. Donna, thank you very much. We're just looking forward.
Thank you very much for all the work you do, and I appreciate all the help you've given us in the City of Buffalo and all the agencies under the City of Buffalo. You know, I think we're a good team, and I do appreciate everything you've done, and thank you very much for this.
And I'm sure we're not going to let you go that easily. So we're looking forward to seeing you in the near future, and maybe even getting out and hitting a few golf balls in Delaware Park.
Sounds
But don't
perfect.
get too comfortable, because we'll be calling you back in. Thanks, everyone, for that. Our next item of business is to approve the minutes for the board meeting held on February 16th, 2022. Directors will find a draft of those minutes and the accompanying resolution in your board book under tab 1. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the two meetings?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Seconded.
All right.
Second.
Is there any discussion, comment, or changes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. We will now move on to a review of the financial plans and the third quarter reports, beginning with the City of Buffalo. The mayor submitted the financial plan containing the plans for the City of Buffalo and covered organizations on May 2nd, 2022. The budget for the City of Buffalo is in the process of review by the City Common Council, and no action will be taken on it here today. We expect the final budget submission and any accompanying revisions to the financial plan to be made in June, with the financial plan reviewed at our June meeting. The BFSA reports on the preliminary 2022-2023 budget and the 2023-2026 financial plan, as well as the third quarter, have been provided under tab 2 in your board book. Jeanette and Bryce, could you walk us through these items? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the board today. I will begin with a review of the city's 2022-23 proposed budget and the corresponding 2023-2026 financial plan. First slide we have here lays out the 4 years of the financial plan. Each year is balanced. Year 1 is $568.2 million, increasing up to $569.6 million in fiscal year 26. The budget over the 4 years totals $2,263,600,000. The next slide we have here compares the fiscal year 22 adopted budget and year-end projection as of the end of the third quarter to the proposed budget. Just a note that the year-end projection for fiscal year '22 is a estimated 7.3 million surplus. And comparatively speaking, budget to budget, it's an increase of $33.6 million. Now, when you compare the year-end estimate to the proposed budget, that's going to be an increase of $23 million in the estimated revenues and $30 million for the budgeted appropriations.
Bryce, is that 7.3 a timing issue, or are we expecting to see a $7.3 million surplus at the end of the year?
Current year, it is a projected surplus, and I will be going into detail on that in the third quarter after the review of the budget overview.
Thank you.
And then yep, okay. And just a reminder of where fund balance was as of June 30th, 2021. Total fund balance was $104.3 million, $38.6 million of that was non-spendable restricted. Largest component was the committed, also known as the rainy day fund, at $40.7 million. The assigned fund balance was of $16.8 million, and then unassigned was $8.2 million. Now that is significant, as the city of Buffalo had been without unassigned fund balance for the prior 2 years. What we have here is I'm sorry, is that Andy?
What's the difference between committed and assigned?
All right, the committed, the $40.7 million is really the rainy day fund. That's what's set aside
Okay,
there. The assigned is going to include your encumbrances from the prior year, also the self-insurance, legal. There's a few smaller components in there.
Yeah, no, no, I didn't know, obviously, you know, the components of non-spendable, restricted, and then assigned. I'm not an accountant, but I was just curious as to what the distinctions are.
Okay.
Thanks, Andy.
The next slide we have here is the 22-23 estimated revenues that total $568.2 million. The largest piece of this is going to be city-generated revenue, approximately 39.3% or $224 million. The next largest revenue received by the city is state-provided revenue, approximately $172 million or 30%. Single largest piece of that is going to be the state aim component of $161.3 million. Third largest revenue stream is from the county. That's 18%, $104.3 million, and that's really the reflective of the sales tax, followed by federal revenue at 9%, almost $53 million. The federal revenue is actually two pieces. A portion of it is the ARPA funds used for the revenue replacement, and then there's additional approximately $750,000 in there that is being used as part of their ARPA plan for housing initiatives. The next revenue bucket is transfers in at $10.7 million, almost 2%, and those transfers in come from the solid waste fund, the water enterprise fund, and the parking fund. And then all other revenues total $4.6 million, less than 1%. So the next couple slides, we're going to identify the major revenue sources and drill into them a little bit over the financial plan. The first one, we're going to look at our taxes over the financial plan. Portions of the taxes include the real property tax, the STAR rebate, mortgage tax, pilots. Taxes are going from 165, or estimated to go from 165.6 million in fiscal year 23 up to 179.4 million in fiscal year 26, with the growth really being driven by the real property tax. So as I said, taxes total 165.6 million and represent 29.1% of total fiscal year 23 revenues. The real property tax levy of 154.6 million is an increase of 6.7 million or 4.5% compared to the prior year tax levy of 147.9 million. Taxes are projected to increase 5.6% or $13.8 million from $165.6 million to $179.4 million over the financial plan. And this increase is attributed to the real property tax levy. The tax levy is projected to increase 2% in year 2, 2.5% in year 3, and then 4% in the fourth year of the financial plan. The citywide reassessment is set to begin in fiscal year 24 and will be in full effect by fiscal year 25-26. The city is currently utilizing 47.5% of the available taxing levy. Currently, the constitutional tax limit is $325.4 million, leaving a available limit of almost $171 million or 52% of the available taxing limit. Real property taxes are budgeted at $148.6 million in fiscal year 23 and are projected to increase by 3.2 million, 2% to $151.7 million in fiscal year 24. Then it increases by 2.6% by 3.9 million to $155.6 million in fiscal year 25. And then an additional increase of 6.5 million or 4.2% to $162.1 million in fiscal year 26. The next slide we have here is just a historical snapshot showing the historical property tax levy going back to fiscal year 12, where it was $143.3 million. Then it was actually reduced to $137 million in fiscal year 16, and since then it's gradually been increased, was held flat at $147.9 million for the 3 most recent fiscal years, and is now increasing to $154.6 million in the proposed 23 budget. And what we have here is a detailed breakout of the 23 tax levy summary. Total tax levy being raised is $154.6 million. $70.8 million is dedicated to the school district. $83.7 million is for city operations, with $34.6 million of that amount for debt service, and the balance of $49.1 million for general fund operations. It's kind of cut off here at the bottom, but what we did is we took last year's rate of $988 per thousand, assessed thousand, and compared it to the increase of $1038 in the current year, and did the calculation on a $250,000 home. So under last year, the taxes on that would have been $2,470, and then that's been increased by $125 to $2,595. So this is just putting in context what the proposed tax increase would do on a home at $250,000.
Bryce, if you compared those taxes, not the tax rates, but the taxes to other communities, either around Western New York and the rest of the state, it seems to me that these are relatively low compared to other groups. And because you've used a $250,000 house, where a lot of individuals obviously have homes that are evaluated at a lot less than $250,000. So we're looking at, I would assume, for many people, a much lower tax increase. Is that correct?
That is correct. And it'll be proportionate as the value of the assessed property goes up, the increase, or the inverse on that, as the value of the house assessed value is lower. You'd see that. Roughly, compared to the suburbs and the surrounding communities, that tax rate is about half of a lot of the locals. And keep in mind, that includes both the city tax as well as the school district tax. It's a combined tax rate.
Right, Bryce, do you have an historical, at least in terms of our history, an historical benchmark? So the city's currently using 47.5% of available.
Correct.
And back when the state of New York mandated us into existence, this is the historical question, how much was of what was available was the city using back
In 2003, the city was utilizing approximately 93% of the authorized limit. So
93.
they were within 7% of utilizing what was available. So
Right.
over the last 19 years, you've seen assessments go up, the entire property assessment pie increase, so those rates of the individual rates have decreased for the most part, but then you've seen their available amount increase.
Right.
So
And so your historical graph, I think 2 panels back,
Nathan, can you give me control of the mouse, please?
2000,
Yes.
right, so if we ran that back to the first year of our existence, well, you don't have those numbers in your head. At some point, could we see those?
Oh, absolutely.
Just run exactly this graph backwards to that moment when the city was using 97% of what was available.
Absolutely.
That will be useful for us and probably any number of publics here in Buffalo. All right?
Yep. I'll provide a combined graph showing that as well as the percent utilized in each year. So
Yes,
you
yes,
can
exactly.
see that
How close to the
constitutional
cap.
tax.
Gotcha.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Moving on to the next set of revenues we're looking at, we had the intergovernmental revenues over the financial plan. The major components of the intergovernmental revenues include state aim, the sales tax component, the tribal state compact casino revenue, and the federal ARPA dollars. Intergovernmental revenues represent $335.5 million, or roughly 59% of total revenues in the proposed budget. Over the financial plans, intergovernmental revenues decreased by $19.2 million, or roughly 6%, to $316.4 million in year 2, reduced a further $11.7 million in fiscal year 25, and then increases in the fourth year by $5.4 million to $310.1 million. A significant portion of the intergovernmental revenues over the financial plan are the American Rescue Plan Act funds, ARPA from 2021. The city included $51.8 million in this federal ARPA funds in fiscal year 23, decreasing down to $27.3 million in fiscal year 24, $6.3 million in fiscal year 25, and then tails off to $2 million in fiscal year 26 for the revenue replacement component. As a reminder, a total of
Yes, Andy?
Bryce, how secure is that increase in AIM funding for the out years?
in my analysis, the out-year AIM funding is speculative. I will be getting into the AIM in a little bit, but just to address your question, Director Sanfilippo, the state did not include any increase to AIM in the state's financial plan.
Okay, so in other words, this is strictly what it is, a projection of the possibility that maybe the state through the 2025-26 fiscal year would be increasing AIM funding.
That is correct. That is the state's position, or the city's position, that the state would be increasing AIM in the 3 out years of the financial plan, recognizing that the state has not increased AIM going back to fiscal year 2012.
Yeah, no,
Right.
they haven't, and I
Right,
was just
right.
wondering. Oh, I'm sorry, Donna, go ahead.
Just to make you aware, the mayor has, I brought that up, that would be a speculative item, and he said he has spoken both to the executive and legislative, branches, and he feels comfortable that this could, perhaps not next year, but in the out years, they will start increasing aid. So he's had multiple conversations on this.
Good to know. taking a step back to the ARPA funds, a total of $331.4 million was awarded to the city. The city has until December 2024 to commit it and to December 2026 to spend it down. The city has projected using $87.5 million over the current financial plan for the lost revenue due to the pandemic. And just as a point of reference, $40 million was utilized in fiscal year 21, and the city is estimating using almost $9 million to close out the current fiscal year 2022. The city does intend to submit a revised ARPA plan by June 30th, 2022, reflecting the reallocations of resources. The current financial plan and the inclusion of the $87.5 million is a shortfall of $36.4 million when compared to the initial ARPA recovery plan submitted. So the city is currently working on that and reviewing that. And just for everybody's reference, the city is within the limits set by the revenue replacement. So the amount of money that's included falls within the guidelines provided by Treasury. Moving on to the Tribal State Compact casino revenue, the city included $49.5 million in total casino revenue over the financial plan. That includes $11 million in fiscal year 23 and 24. This increases to $12.5 million in fiscal year 25, and then $15 million in fiscal year 26. The out-year increases are deemed speculative and total $4 million. The amounts that were previously held by the Seneca Gaming Commission were released to the city in April of 22. There should be one additional payment at year end for the city for the current year. It'd be the first quarter payment to the city. As a point of reference, the current compact extension expires at the end of 2023. So this New York State and the Gaming Commission are in the process or will soon be negotiating a new compact, and it's unknown what that will look like at this time. Next slide, please. The next slide we have is in regards to sales tax. It is estimated at $104.3 million in fiscal year 23. That's an increase of, and then it increases by $6.9 million to $111.2 million in fiscal year 26. The increase in year, it's a $1.5 million increase to $105.9 million in fiscal year 24. Then an additional $2.6 million increase to $108.5 million in fiscal year 25. And then followed by a $2.7 million increase in fiscal year 26 to $111.2 million. The first increase is 1.5%, and then the increase is 2.5% in the 2 out years in light of the current collection rate of sales tax. It does seem reasonable at this time. Now, there is an increase of $17.8 million, almost 21% between fiscal year 22 budget amount and what is included in the 23 budget. But that's just due to higher than expected collections on sales tax. Sales tax really rebounded to a level that people didn't foresee. Going forward, though, it's not sure how long that would be sustainable. So if there's a downturn there, that could be a future risk.
And it's safe to say that the current year projected surplus is largely driven by the higher than expected sales tax numbers, fair to say?
Yes. Moving on to state aim. It's budgeted at $161 million fiscal year 23, and then increases by $3.2 million to $164.5 million in fiscal year 24. An additional increase of $3.3 million in fiscal year 25, and then a final increase of $3.4 million to $171.2 million in fiscal year 26. So over the 3 out years, that's a cumulative increase of $9.9 million. And as I already reported, there was no increases built into the state financial plan. However, Commissioner Estrick is communicated to us that the mayor has been in conversations with both the executive and legislative branches. So we'll see what comes in next year's budget proposal by the state. Moving on to fines. Significant fines over the financial plan include parking tags, fines and penalties, traffic violation fines, and court fines. Fines total $8.2 million or 1.4% of budgeted revenues in fiscal year '23. They increased by $2 million or 24.9% over the financial plan, with the increase being attributed to the parking tags and fines. So over the 4 years of the plan, they're increasing by $2 million from $5 million up to $7 million. And just point of reference, the $7 million is more in line to pre-pandemic levels. So the city is giving itself 4 years to return to those levels with this proposal. Moving on to miscellaneous revenues over the financial plan. They go from $16 million in fiscal year '23 to $18.9 million in fiscal year '26. That's an increase of $2.9 million or 18.3%. Significant miscellaneous revenues include grant reimbursements, primarily for fire and police department operations, sale of capital assets, and that includes both city assets as well as the in-rem sales process, and the settlement of legal claims are some of the larger components of miscellaneous revenue.
Well, this might be a stupid question, but why is there such a significant bump in the settlement of legal claims in the '23-24 fiscal year?
That increase in the out year is attributed to a prospective settlement in regards to the opioid crisis. The city included it previously. They are a party to a settlement, and they expect it to be settled in that time, in that amount.
So that's the unrestricted portion of the opioid settlement then?
Yes.
Got it, okay. And I think you had earlier, what is the item for sale in '24, '25? That's jumping the, was that a parking ramp, if I recall correctly?
Sale of capital assets, yes, that is largely the sale of a parking ramp, as well as reflecting the continuation of in-rem property sales in that year as well. All right, so we kind of addressed those questions, and addressed my slide. Moving on, to the remaining revenues over the financial plan. These revenues include service charges, non-property taxes, license and permits, and interest. All other revenues are estimated total $32.3 million in fiscal year '23, an increase to $35.8 million in fiscal year '26, an increase of $3.5 million or approximately 11%. There's a minimal variance in revenues across the financial plan over this time, increasing by the $3.5 million. Largely driven by service charges, which are budgeted increased by $2.5 million, and those service charges are related to the parking meter fees. So once again, they're looking as more people are returning to the city, paying for parking, revenues will be increasing on that side. And then interest income is budgeted increased by $900,000 over the financial plan. There are no additional.
What capital assets are we planning on selling in '24, '25?
That is largely a parking ramp.
Parking ramp and surface lot.
Where are they located, Donna?
By the Fernbach ramp?
Okay. And what kind of, how did you guys come to an estimate to get from 6 million up to 18.5 million?
That's through our OSP, real estate department.
Okay. We have a buyer? About Jamal buying it?
No, he's not. It's still being negotiated, thank you.
All right. Okay. I apologize for the interruption.
Thank you, Andy and Donna. Go on, please.
All right. Moving on to expenditures. The 22-23 proposed budget, total expenditures are $568.2 million. The largest portion of that is for fringe benefits, 30% at $169.4 million, followed by the interfunds transfers out of $105.5 million, 19%. Police Department is budgeted at $90.7 million, representing 16%. Fire Department represents 13% of expenditures at $71 million. Public Works at $36.1 million, or 6%. Utilities at $19.3 million, 3%. And then all other departments and other expenditures represent 13% of total expenditures at $76.4 million. What we did on this chart is just identified 3 of the larger departments, what their expenditures are scheduled to be, estimated to be over the financial plan, as well as all other departments. You'll see that there's a decrease in total departmental expenditures in fiscal year 23, going down to fiscal 26, and that's largely due to the inflationary cost drivers that were built into fiscal year 23, and then dropping off in fiscal year 24, and then the increase reflecting personal service costs in the out years. Looking down at total general charges over the 4 years, they go from $196 million up to $199 million, and then interfund transfers out decreased from $105.9 million down to $104.6 million. So year to year, general fund expenditures are budgeted increase by $33.6 million, or 6.3%. Total departmental spending of $266.4 million. Of that, that's an increase of $22.5 million year to year, or 9.2%. And this includes an increase of $14.9 million for projected amounts for steps and wage. And that can be for personal service costs. That 14.9 can be further broken down to $9.5 million for the salary and wage, $4.7 million for increased police and fire overtime. There's also an increase of $3.8 million for supplies, largely for the inflationary costs for gasoline. An increase of $2.8 million for capital outlay for additional vehicles being purchased in streets and the police department. And then there's an increase of $1.1 million for services, for outside contractual services for the Department of Assessment and Taxation. The police department, that increase year to year of $5.4 million can be broken down into the following pieces. There's an increase of $2.2 million for overtime, $1.4 million increase for step progression, $1.1 million for the addition of 14 detective positions, and then $500,000 for the purchase of additional police vehicles. And that part falls under capital outlay. The fire department is increasing by $5 million. $2.4 million of that is for an increase in overtime. $2.1 million is an increase for step progressions, and then an additional $500,000 for supplies and capital outlay.
Donna, maybe you can answer this. We see a vast increase in costs for the DA's office associated with the new discovery laws. Is that part of the drive for the need for the additional detectives? Is because discovery is creating additional procedural costs for the department? Oh, too far away. Yeah, Donna, with the additional detectives, is part of that the new discovery laws creating additional paperwork requirements for BPD to comply? I know for the DA it's been a very expensive and complicated process.
That's part of it, and it's also to improve this solving of crimes.
So, okay.
And just have more feet on the ground doing that. One of the things we did to help, with the what you're saying, the discovery laws, is we put money in the budget for a video for when they are not interrogating, when they're bringing people in and questioning them. Excuse me. They have it's something that's going to be online, a cloud-based system, where then the courts can reach out to it and help in that regards. But the discoveries laws had a ton of overtime impact on us.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay.
So this is a question to Donna along exactly these lines. So but simply because it's named, it jumps out. You know, the 14 new detectives. But in the In the city's budget that was also provided to us, in the introduction, there is talk about the city creating a new Office of Innovation, an Office of Climate Adaptation, and expanding some other offices. So, Donna, you regularly had a big number for us. So, how many total new net FTE will there be on the budget? Include police, fire, include the detectives, include, you know these namings that I just recited from the mayor's preface. So will there be, what, 25 new people on the budget?
In total, I have approximately right now, we had the 14 detectives. The law department had an additional, I think it was 14, but that's because they're trying to upgrade some new positions. So not all of those will be filled for, people are in those positions now and they'll transition to the higher ones. And then, excuse me, we'll eliminate some of the other ones. So those were the two larger departments. So I think totally we're at approximately 35 additional positions right now.
Now that's
35 to 40. We're kind of going through because we have attrition through some of them where people are holding them for permanent positions.
now, Donna. So 35-ish. I heard you say 35 to 40.
Correct.
So I'll just say 35-ish. That's 35-ish net new FTE across multiple departments, right?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. All right.
Okay, go on.
All right. In departmental increases continuing under Public Works, it's increasing by 2.7 million. 1.5 million of that was for the capital outlay for the purchase of vehicles, almost $1 million for increased wages. Under admin and finance, increase of 2.6 million. 2.3 of that is for gasoline and other oils and lubricants. 300,000 for increase for personal services. And then under all other departments is a net increase of 6.8 million. Increase of $1 million in the law department for additional attorneys, as was just discussed. Increase of 1.2 million in the management information systems for software and hardware upgrades for the 311 system, and an increase of $750,000 for targeted land improvements under Office of Strategic Planning. Now these estimated.
And there was also the $1 million for assessment for the revale project.
Yep. The estimated amounts included in the financial plan include future labor contracts, settlements that are budgeted in the fringe benefits section. Moving down to the total general charges section, fiscal year 23 is estimated at $196 million. That's a year-to-year budget increase of 5.9 million or 3.1%, with fringe benefits increasing by 2.9 million, almost 2%, and all other general charges increasing by 3 million or 2%. The largest cost escalator is retiree health insurance. It is budgeted at 42.8 million, which is an increase of 1.9 million or 4.6%. This is followed by an increase for active employee health insurance that's increasing by 1.7 million, and that's budgeted at 46 million. The pension contributions are budgeted decrease by 5 million. There's a decrease for the employee retirement system contributions of 3.1 million, and a decrease for the police and fire retirement system in the amount of 2 million. Now, these decreases are reflective of the composition of the city's current workforce, as well as the hiring of new employees at Tier 6. The Tier 6 employees contribute for the life of their employment. So what the city has to contribute is actually less compared to a Tier 1 through 4 employee. So there are savings there for the city in regards to that. So as more and more fire and police officers retire at Step 2, the city replaces them with Step 6 employees. So that's why you see a significant decrease there. And then the salary adjustment line is included at 7.7 million, and it's increased over the financial plan in the 2 out years. All other general charges are increasing by $3 million. Largest portion of that is the utilities. They are budgeted at 19.3 million. That's an increase of 2.6 million compared to fiscal year 22. And as I mentioned earlier, it's reflecting inflationary cost increases for natural gas and electricity. Other general charges are increasing by 300,000, and that's for the settlement of prior year legal settlements. And then duty disability payments are increasing by 100,000. Transfers out are increasing by 5.8 million to 105.9 million year to year. And that's an increase. That increase of 5.8 is for the principal and interest on outstanding debt. Excuse me. Over the financial plan, expenditures are projected to increase by 1.3 million or less than 0.5%, with departmental costs decreasing by 400,000 and general charges increasing by 3 million. Departmental expenditures are projected to decrease by 6.4 million in fiscal year 24 due to the public works capital outlay decreasing by 2.5 million due to the purchase of vehicles in fiscal year 23, a decrease of 1.6 million in MIS, largely due to the one-time cost of the hardware and software for the 311 system upgrade. Decrease of 1.5 million in admin and finance, reflecting the decrease in the price of gasoline in fiscal year, estimated price in fiscal year 24. Service costs for assessment and taxation are decreasing by 1.5 million for services being provided in fiscal 23 for the preparation of the citywide reevaluation. Departmental costs are increasing by 2.1 million and 3.8 million in fiscal years 25 and 26 to reflect salary increases in those years. Over the financial plan, expenditures are projected to increase 1.3 million. I'm sorry, I already said that. There's an increase of 0.1% in fiscal year 24, an increase of 0.6% in fiscal year 25, and an increase of 0.9% in fiscal year 26, largely driven by fringe benefits under general charges, with the fringe benefits increasing by 5.5 million over the financial plan, driven by health insurance, which is increasing by 4.5 million, approximately 1.7% annually. Then the pension payments are increasing by 1.4 million over the 3 out years, approximately 1.1% annually. Utilities are decreasing by 1.4 million over the financial plan. The assumption is the inflationary costs in fiscal year 23 will drop down and regulate more. The interfund transfers out decreased by 1.3 million over the financial plan. Transfer to the school district is held flat at 70.8 million. Transfer to capital debt service fund is at 34.6 million in fiscal year 23, and then it decreases down to 33.4 million in fiscal year 26. And then the transfer to capital projects fund is flat at 400,000. The city's proposed financial plan includes staffing of 2,757. This reflects the increase of 14 positions in the police department. Fire department is held flat at 742. As Commissioner Estrick has already commented, they are really adding closer to 35 positions to the budget as they're working through some of the civil service titles. And we'll have a update on that at the June meeting. At that time, if there are no other questions, I would like to turn it over to our executive director.
Thank you, Bryce. So before I begin with summary comments, I just wanted to take a moment to thank my staff for all their hard work during the last couple of weeks. It was a substantial lift to go through all of this, do the analysis, and write the reports. It was a team effort between the reading, reviewing, and writing. So thank you to everybody. I also want to thank, the mayor and his team along with Donna Estrick and her team, not only for their work and effort that went into the financial plan, but also for working closely with our office to be able to conduct the thorough analysis that we have available today. And then just an extension to the thank you to the district officials. Jeff, thank you for helping us get through our review, to the interim superintendent Williams, and to the officials over at BMHA, including Gillian Brown, Modesto Candelario, and their finance team, John Walters and Teresa Spagna, as well as Burra, Tracy Cooley from Burra is our main person we work with. So moving to the comments. It's been a long time since I used one of these. Hopefully I remember. There is an overall, our overall comment is that we find the financial plan to be balanced, we find it to be reasonable, we find it to be responsible. There is an overall encompassing risk facing the city, facing all organizations with respect to high inflation that we're looking at. There's a risk of a recession, so there's some unknowns as we, approach the future. During the period of economic expansion from 2009 through the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020, the city elected to hold real property taxes relatively flat and use fund balance to support recurring expenditures. More than a little, quite a bit of that was attributed to waiting for the casino revenue to begin again, and that has since been resolved. So this, coupled with the non-payment of casino revenue for several years, had the effect of bringing down unrestricted fund balance and unassigned fund balance to low levels. Significantly, the rainy day fund was maintained during this entire time period. That's very important to cite. As we frequently discuss, there's three revenue sources that comprise the majority of the City of Buffalo's revenue, usually around 83 to 85%, being real property taxes, sales tax, and state aid. State aid's been flat for 10 plus years. Sales tax, there's no control over. Real property taxes is the only area that the city can effectuate change for those main categories. So the proposed budget increase of $6.7 million, or a 4.5% increase, we believe is responsible and appropriate, particularly in light of the external economic uncertainties that the City of Buffalo is facing at this time. Well, not just the City of Buffalo, all organizations. The 2022-23 proposed budget is balanced with $52.6 million of federal stimulus. The amount over the financial plan for federal stimulus to replace lost revenues is $87.5 million. There's a difference between what's in the financial plan and what's in their approved ARPA recovery plan. The difference is roughly $36 million. The city administration has indicated the intent is to June 30th, the new ARPA plan is due. They're going to revise that plan. So when we come to the board with the proposed resolution for June to approve the financial plans, it would be contingent on the approval, the subsequent approval of that plan. Casino payments, there's some uncertainties regarding this, particularly as the agreement is going to be coming expired December 2023. In terms of conservativism, we looked at the increases in years 3 and 4 of, it ends up being pretty minor. 4 million is speculative, but it was not substantial enough to warrant a revision to the revision to the financial plan. Additionally, we did continue to conservatively deem the 2% increases in state aid that were built into the financial plan as speculative, simply because it's not in the financial plan for the state of New York. Just to be more conservative and scope it in and look at it in totality. So in total, between those two buckets, roughly 14 million we are deeming speculative in the out years, year 3 and 4 of the financial plan, which we did not consider to be significant enough to warrant a request to revise the financial plan. The other repeat comment that we have every year is the use of non-recurring one-time revenue that's used to support recurring expenses. The sale of the parking ramps, the settlement of the opioid lawsuit primarily totals about 37 million, and we again repeat our finding that the use of one-time funds to support recurring revenues is an indicator of a structural imbalance that will need to be determined how to address that in future years, whether there's a new revenue identified or reduction in new expenditures.
But you'd agree that the move for property tax increases that we've been recommending for a number of years, hopefully that they can be small amounts that individuals won't notice all of that much going from year to year, but that could start to cover these structural imbalances and therefore leave the city in a better position to provide the services that obviously the citizens of Buffalo deserve and need. So I just want to recognize, as we talk about the revenues at this point, that it is important for us to have a plan on property taxing and hope that we have reasonable and small incremental steps going forward in property taxes. And I know that we've recommended that, but that would fix and go a long way in working towards balancing the budget. So I think it's an important point that we make here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's almost a repeat comment as well, that there are revenues that will continue to require monitoring. The financial plan basically returns revenues to pre-pandemic levels incrementally over the financial plan. So by the time you get to year 4, it's back to pre-pandemic. There's some unknowns in terms of when some of those revenues will actually come back. So we've identified 4 main buckets: parking meter fees, mortgage default fee, parking fines, and traffic violation fines as areas to monitor. And also, it goes without saying, sales tax is such a significant part of their budget that if there's a downward shift in sales tax, that would have a substantial impact on their budget. The budget does shift in the right direction to address the overtime budget gaps that we've talked about over the last number of years. It increases by 4.7 million. We continue to recommend this cost be closely monitored. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends a minimum of, I think it's 2 months. I didn't jot it down on my notes. Thank you.
2 months or 15%. Yeah.
Thank you. 2 months of recurring operating expenditures be established as unrestricted reserves. Depending on how that's calculated, that's going to vary anywhere between a shortfall of 11 million to 29 million. So we again recommend a fund balance replenishment program be considered. And then finally, just an important notice that the transfer to the school district stays flat over this financial plan at 70.8 million. There's no provision to increase fund balance over the next 4 years. That is built into the plan specifically. And with respect to the refuse fund, the general fund used to subsidize that fund, if you remember. It's no longer happening. It's not happening over the financial plan. There is a proposed increase in tote fees that it's projected to be adequate to be able to allow the refuse fund to be self-sufficient. Any cash surpluses are used to pay back. There's an outstanding loan from the general fund of 12.4 million that's reported as like a restriction of fund balance. So as that's paid back, it can kick down to unrestricted fund balance. So that summarizes our comments. Again, we feel that the budget is balanced, it's responsible, the financial plan is reasonable.
Do you know off the top of your head, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but how many of the other cities that are under the recommendation that are hitting the 15% of their fund balances?
I haven't looked at that specifically, but
But
we
it
could
might
do
be an
that.
interesting question. If no one meets the recommendation, then maybe we need to think through that a little bit more, I would think. But my suspicion is, given the last few years, that very few of the towns and cities are meeting those recommendations at this point. But thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Are there other questions, discussions, issues that we want to bring up on the budget for the city of Buffalo at this point?
Are we the only voice that regularly recites, it's a kind of recitation for us, consider a fund balance replenishment program that has been across time one of our recitations out of concern. And I hope that didn't sound cynical. Is there another voice? Is there, I suppose the question goes to Donna as well as to Jeanette. Is there, we saw, I think we saw nothing in the mayor's budget about a fund balance replenishment program.
Excuse me.
Correct?
Correct. I wouldn't really probably expect one in here either. Common Council has been working with the mayor's office, has been working with the comptroller's office to push forward a fund balance policy. There was one that was passed late summer, early fall. I think there's some revisions that are being made to it because some of it probably didn't have at least my read of it, it didn't have a lot of teeth to it, but there is some work going in that direction, and they've had a lot of dialogue at their meetings about building up fund balance to a certain minimum level, far exceeds what the current,
Right.
the 30-day rainy day fund is.
Right, which is to say, council, or at least the initiative is clear in council that this should be done. So, and that's what I meant with it. Are we the only voice? Okay,
Yep.
good. And in terms of monitoring, during the worst first half of the first pandemic year, we began working with the mayor's team to do heightened cash flow vigilance. And that was during the very, very dark first part of budgeting during the pandemic. Are we still doing that? Is there, are we still doing that with them, or are they doing what they have their own internal procedures?
I would say a little
There's
bit
a
of,
monthly cash flow that's filed with Common Council every month? Is that what you're talking about?
that was going to be my response. So a little bit of both would probably be the right answer to that. So there is a cash flow that is filed monthly with Common Council.
Right.
And discussed during their finance committee meetings at pretty good detail. The comptroller's office also took the initiative to really develop a more detailed cash flow too, so we can really see where their estimates hit and where they can pinpoint some of the issues, because they push the issues back to like the June time period. So we can see the dips and the valleys with cash. And that's just general fund cash, though. It doesn't include any of the federal stimulus. So
Understood,
we're
understood.
not particularly worried about the cash, stance of the city at this point, but that is continuing to happen. So
All right,
that
good. All right.
that is good.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, any other discussion? Okay. If not, we'll now move on and review the Buffalo City School District's 2022-2023 draft budget and related four-year financial plan, along with the summary of the third quarter report. Any changes made to this submission pursuant to the adoption of the budget by the Buffalo Board of Education will be subsequently reviewed by BFSA at the June meeting. The staff reports on these items have been provided for you under tab 3 in your board book. Nathan, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All righty.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. The following is an overview of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority's analysis of the school district's fiscal year 22-23 draft budget and 23 through 26 financial plan. Okay, so I'm going to go over some of the highlights here. There's a theme of the day, the unprecedented level of funding. The school district has received an unprecedented level of funding, and of this, one significant portion is with New York State aid. And the biggest component of the state aid is the foundation aid. Well, beginning in the current fiscal year 21-22, the state began a full phase-in to fully fund foundation aid. So that continues in 22-23, and then will be completely phased in 23-24, the first out year of the financial plan. So the fiscal year 2022 year-to-year increase in state aid is $41.2 million. It's budgeted to increase $35 million in next year's budget, and then another $44 million in 23-24 when it's fully phased in. And so when you take each phase in and you combine it over the financial plan, that's a cumulative four-year increase of $172.1 million. And then just this bottom note here is that the biggest offset would be as the JSCB refunding winds down, there's a reduction in New York State building aid. And so cumulatively, that'd be $43.3 million over that same time frame. So the first bucket is the New York State aid. That impacts the general fund directly. Continuing on that theme is the federal stimulus funding. Now this impacts the grants fund because it's meant to supplement, not supplant, general fund operations. So federal aid has been awarded to the district to address a multitude of issues that came out of the pandemic. The total federal stimulus award is close to $290 million. That's from I want to make sure I say this right, the CRRSA ESSER 2 funds, and then the second one is the ARPA ESSER 3 funding. ESSER 2 is available through September of 2023. ARPA ESSER 3 is available through September 2024. Now, the financial plan includes, like I said, that funding will be coming in the first 2 years of this new financial plan. And so once it expires in the third fiscal year, 24-25, when the stimulus funding would no longer be available, right now the financial plan shows an elimination of 326 positions that were added in the next fiscal year. And then just there is a plan to continue some of the added services, the ELT program and the expanded summer school learning program. That would be beginning in year 24-25. Those would be general fund funded. So there's no federal aid reflected within the general fund, excepting this $8 million from indirect cost expenditures. It's a revenue that the general fund would receive on the behalf of or from this special projects fund. Okay, so that said, there is a structural imbalance within the financial plan. Now, what's going on is that the physical staffing footprint within the district has not kept pace with the reduction in pupils. I'll show a couple slides in a little bit showing the staffing levels and the pupil levels. But the last 2 years, related to the pandemic, have seen a pretty big drop in pupils. It's expected to rebound in 22-23, and we'll get into that in some more detail, but right now, the district acknowledges that there's a structural deficit between the two, and that this is somewhat masked between the unprecedented levels of federal and state funding. Okay, so if you can see this, like, I have it broken out on the bottom here. You can see a pretty steep decline. That's the pandemic. And the blue is the district's enrollment number. The top part is the pupils, Buffalo pupils within the charter schools. And so this is the projected for 22-23, and that would be the more normalized level of district enrollment.
Do we know how they did that? Jeff, I'm just wondering, given that New York State's lost 40,000 students statewide, I'm just wondering, it does look, I mean, and the state numbers sort of bear it out, that Buffalo seems to be an outlier and continuing to have students. Is that having the refugees and immigrant populations coming in, or do you have an idea on why we're doing so well?
No, it's really a representative of the schools that we are budgeting for. So we're budgeting more capacity than there are students at this time. So we've not reduced schools.
Right.
We've reduced some classrooms at lower grades, but we really haven't let the drop in students catch up yet.
Okay, thank
So
you.
that will be reflected, every year we reset these budget books.
Right.
But at this time, there wasn't really any desire to look at reducing schools or anything like that.
Thank you.
Okay, so the actual number of district pupils in 1920 was 33,290, and the projected number in 22-23 is 32,560. So that would, if you exclude the two pandemic years, that would continue the normal trajectory of a gradual decline in Buffalo enrolled pupils. So this takes a look at the last several years of actual total all funds and general fund district-wide employees on all full-time employees. This shows where the federal stimulus funds kicks in. There's a bump up of 326 full-time equivalent positions, and then it would drop down again, largely because once that funding's gone, there's no plan to continue those programs. Those positions would need to be eliminated. Okay. So, general fund revenues over the four-year plan increase at a 1.9 CAGR. Expenditures are slightly less at 1.7, but we want to separate the first year from the final 3 years because it would kind of distort what was going on. If you separate year one with the 3 out years, it's much different. So general fund revenues over those 3 years, from 23 to 24 to the end of the financial plan, are only about 0.4% increase, and expenditures continue the same path of increase at 1.45. So it's much larger in the 3 out years, and that's where the gaps begin to increase, widen. There is a use of appropriated fund balance over this period to address those budgetary deficits. So excluding the 22-23, the projected deficit in each fiscal year of the financial plan expands from 8.3 in 22-23 all the way up to 30.8 million in the final year. And I have a slide showing that. The bottom here gets a little bit cut off here, but I put just the fund balance that's appropriated each year to fill the gap as a percentage of total general fund appropriations.
And Nathan, on the expenditures, there's no increases for contracts, right?
Not directly. There is, I have a slide that'll show,
Okay.
yeah, the reserve for contingency addressing the contracts. Okay. Okay. So Fund balance status and projections. The district's fund balance position has improved considerably over the last 5 years. At June 30th, 2020, fund balance is anticipated to total $319 million, including $109.7 million in unassigned fund balance. Unassigned fund balance is anticipated to exceed the district's 4% retronage policy considerably by almost $69 million. The financial plan includes the use, as I just mentioned, of available fund balance in each fiscal year. Total fund balance is projected at $228.7 million at June 30th, 2026. Unassigned fund balance is projected to decrease to $45.2 million by that same date, which would be much closer to the 4% retronage policy. It would be over by a little over more than $1 million.
And could you remind me again what the OSC school district fund balance policy is?
4% of general fund
It is
expenditures.
4% as well, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
No,
Or
actually,
is that not for?
That's not,
The big five?
it's not for the big five.
Got it, okay, I wasn't sure about that, okay.
and then this slide here just shows the actual fund balances at fiscal year end along with the projected numbers. You can see the current fiscal year here, it's at the high point right there, and then the appropriation of fund balance over the financial plan would show the decrease in total fund balance, along with the blue line, which is the unassigned. So taking a much closer look at just the general fund revenues of the financial plan, the ones that I want to point out are the main areas of change. The general fund revenues are budgeted at $42 million greater, or 4.5%, than last year's 21-22 adopted budget. This is driven by a substantial $34.3 million increase, or about 5% in New York State aid, except in New York State building aid. You can see on the far right here, New York State aid is the largest component. It's the largest component overall, and it's the one that increases at the greatest rate at 12.2 over the financial plan. Whereas other ones such as the contribution from the city, the federal Medicaid are pretty much flat. Sales taxes increasing slightly by 4.5% over the financial plan. And just taking a look at state aid totals $726.9 million in 22-23. It's projected to grow to $815.8 in 15-16, which is close to $90 million, or 12.2%. I mentioned it briefly, but that next year is year 2 of 3 of the state's pledge to fully fund New York State Foundation aid, as established by New York State following the 2006 Campaign for Fiscal Equity campaign court decision. Another big change is with New York State Transportation Aid, which is the state's reimbursement for prior year transportation expenses. Transportation aid is budgeted at $38 million in 22-23, projected to grow to $48.4 in 25-26, $10.3 million, or 27%. And this is based on a normalized level of transportation services. It's well known how the district's transportation has been impacted the last few years. There's been fewer people and there's been a lot less services provided. This financial plan assumes a standard school year along with more standardized services. And then they'd be reimbursed in the form of transportation aid the following year.
Nathan, do you know, is, given the problem finding bus drivers, is this realistic, and will we have to raise the wages of the bus drivers just to be able to get additional bus drivers, and what cost? Have we analyzed that to try to figure out what cost those might be?
So there's a two-part question there. This is based on the current number of bus runs, which is about 460 on average. There's a bit more in the afternoon than in the morning. That was reduced just over 200 runs from what was provided pre-pandemic. So this financial plan assumes the continuation of the current number of runs. There are proposals which I could defer to the district on that as far as bus drivers and transportation.
Do you want to address any of this? What are your thoughts on bus drivers?
You know, there have been some, like I know they've looked at bonuses, things like that to try to find them. I don't, it doesn't seem like there are the drivers right now. So I'm not sure exactly how it's going to shake out over the next couple of years. You know, they're really looking at everything. And, you know, they're not our drivers, so it's for students, so obviously we're working through a vendor. So,
Yeah.
you know, we're continuing to kind of look at everything related to that, including possibly changing bell times more to maybe, we have a two-tier system. There's, you know, two runs for each driver in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, but they might try to see if we can find a way to do 3, which might allow us to do the same number of routes with the current number of buses. So there's a bunch of different things we're looking at.
Thanks.
So taking a look at the 23 through 26 financial plan, general fund expenditures, overall expenditures total over $1 billion. It's 1 billion, I don't want to misspeak, 1.0201 million, or over $1 billion in the draft budget. And they projected to total 1,073.2 million, we'll say, in fiscal year 25 through 26, which is an increase of just over 53 million, or about 5.2%. There's 4 areas that I wanted to talk over here as far as the expenditures, and that's the unsettled labor contracts, the related reserve for contingency, the charter school payment, and then the transportation expenditures. Well, the first one is unsettled labor contracts. All labor contracts, all collective bargaining units have labor contracts which either are expired or will expire over the next 4 years. All the ones that are funded through the general fund, I should say. 23 through 26 financial plan is significantly different than what we see in the past, and that past reports may have included an estimated amount to settle. This one specifically ties it in as an expenditure within reserve for contingency, and I can have a breakout of that in a moment. The cumulative amount provided over this plan for this purpose is $131.4 million, and this contributes to the cumulative projected financial plan budget gap of $90.3 million. And just the note that the district does have sufficient fund balance, as we showed a couple slides ago, to fully fund these projected deficits over the next 4 years. However, that's, you know, indicative of the structural imbalance that they are using the fund balance to close those gaps.
Well, there's 2 parts to this, right? So there's the past labor contracts that, if presumably the pattern of negotiating contracts prevails, they can use fund balance to pay past already owed wage increases and things and bonuses, however that's going forth. But then there's the second part, which is the continuing part to all of that, which then it wouldn't be appropriate to use fund balance. It would have to be somehow accounted for in the general budget going forward. So it seems to me that, I mean, just for the record, that I think we're perfectly fine with them using fund balance to settle contracts, particularly those that have expired for the last couple of years, because that's partly why we've put money away in fund balances, is to be able to settle those contracts, and that they wouldn't be able to settle contracts if they weren't able to bring people back up to where they would have been if we'd settled the contracts when they expired. So I just wanted to put that on the
Sure.
record as we talk about this. Okay, thank you.
So I mentioned that this financial plan includes a reserve for contingency, which is, it's not a specific expenditure. It was established as a contingency to cover revenue reductions and or expenditure increases, which may occur after the budget gets adopted. The reserve for contingency expenditure totals $31.2 million in the draft budget, and increases to $51.3 million by fiscal year 25-26. The different groups there are, largest one, which we mentioned, unsettled labor contracts, totals 131.4 million over the 4 years. The return of ELT programming and the summer school expansion. So I mentioned that it's being funded in year 1 and 2 through ESSER funds and in the grants fund. Once that would cease, there's $6 million in 24-25 and 25-26 to continue those programs, if the district chooses to do that. And then there's just this catch-all general unspecified contingency of $7 million in year 1 and combined $13 million for the first 3 years and nothing in the 4th year. So overall, the reserve for contingency is $156.4 million within all, combined within the financial plan. And then just the bottom there, I show what the percentage of total general fund expenditures is, how it compares to the total expenditures. 3.1% in 22-23. So charter school payments are very large. It's the 3rd largest general fund expenditure at about 15% of total general fund, all total expenditures at $154.6 million. These include the funds that the district forwards to 22 area charter schools. It's Buffalo public residents that are within, mostly charter schools within incorporated Buffalo, but 2 that are outside, where some Buffalo resident pupils go to school. What's driving the increase over the financial plan is twofold: the increase in the number of pupils within those schools, and also the increase in the tuition rate. And so the increase is, the number of pupils would go up from an estimated 10,840 to 12,081 over that time frame. And so the increase is 30.8 million or 19.9% over the financial plan.
Nathan, what you just presented and commented on increase in estimated pupils from 10.8 to 12. So I think this is a question to Mr. Pritchard. That is district central administration estimation, and it's only based on a mathematical projection of what the trend lines were, right?
No, for the charter schools, we query them for what the number of, the seats that they have in their school, and then we look at that compared to history, because they also get suburban kids. So we kind of weigh, we do a bit of a balancing act between the total number of seats they're allowed to have and the number that we think will be filled with BPS kids, and the number that we think will be vacant. So it's our numbers calculated based on what they're telling us and based on history.
All right.
And it's, as you can see, it's growing substantially.
Sure. But the raw data come from the charters as well as just from your own census mechanisms.
Right.
Just to make sure I didn't, I'm not blindsided because I was not paying attention, but the ratios, the percentage ratios, overall population, charter and district, that doesn't include any suburban kids, does it?
Correct, we do not pay.
Oh, okay, good.
So charter schools themselves will have more students and more revenues than what is.
Right, okay, this is, of course, not a report on their fiscal well-being, this is internal. Got it. And at what moments during the year, when is the hard census date? When will you, as budget keepers and budget planners, when will you know hard numbers on census?
Really not till the end of the year. It takes till about November to know. They tell tell us a number in July and then September 1st, before
Right.
school even starts. So we're just relying on them totally.
Sure.
By about November 1st, we have a little indication, but the numbers get recalculated every 2 months throughout the entire year.
Okay.
But it typically starts out higher, and then it kind of drops throughout the year. There's attrition.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Well, so, but you're a planning unit, a planning entity, so all you can do is model
Right.
the ratios, because it's not until the end of the year, that at the end of fiscal, that you know for sure.
That's correct.
Okay. And, all right.
That number's at a full-time equivalent count too. So is it 5 times a year that they report?
Let's say, there's 6 tuition
Six,
payments, and each one of them,
Yeah.
there's an FTE count calculated.
Right.
Is it, and that's what goes to the state for,
So the school district's forwarding funds based on the full-time equivalent count of pupils within those. So, like, for example, like the Global Studies Charter School, which is in Lackawanna, it's probably, I'm gonna say roughly 50% Buffalo resident pupils, and that can fluctuate depending on, where the kids are coming from. So
Right.
they get, like Jeff said, six times a year, and they get a full-time equivalent count.
well, Nathan, you began, and we know our friends in the district use a number similar. Unless nothing is done across the 4 years, what was it, 800? In order to balance the budget, there have to be, how many, 800 fewer? Remember your number? Across 4 years.
Oh, what would the increase?
Across 4 years, unless nothing else
Yeah.
changed.
Well, the assumption, you're talking about the assumption of pupil increase?
No, not the student population.
Okay.
What was it? The, unless, nothing is done, and we know district leadership watches very closely. How many fewer employees would there have to be to balance the budget?
Oh, so what I was showing there was an increase of stimulus funds, funded positions.
Yep.
And then once they're gone, that there would be the decreases in there. That wasn't necessarily the budget, that was just based on when the grant funding was no longer available.
All right,
Yeah.
I understand.
There's also a component built into the financial plan, so for every 100 students that,
Right.
that transfer from BPS to charter school, there's a built-in reduction of 6.5 teachers.
Right, and so at cross-time, using these budget inputs, it was 100 fewer?
It was, it
Per
ends up, I can tell you the dollar equivalent.
No, the personnel.
Personnel is like 80.
100 fewer?
Well, yeah, it was 100 per 100 pupil, it was, gosh, what was the number, 81?
Okay. so
81
what-
teachers and
Oh,
about
yeah.
9 million.
Yeah,
All right. Which is to say, unless, unless there were gap closing measures, these would be the automatic necessary reductions.
those are planned at this point.
Yeah, they're not automatic,
I didn't mean to say automatic, yes.
but it's our,
But
we
they're-
basically have a flat number of kids in Buffalo.
Right.
And if I send more kids to charter schools, I don't want to count them in both. I don't want to count kids in charter schools and our schools. So that's why I have that 6.5 FTE reduction in our per 100. So I do that just to not double count
Right.
the expenditures. Now, ultimately, what we do will be determined every year based on the school's budget process and the funding available at that time. But
which of course does relate to my other question about, the hard census date, which tells you about your client population, which, all right, those are, that's all moving.
Yeah, and we need to make the decision, so for the next school year, we have to make a decision by now.
Right, we've
For
been,
the next school year.
Right.
Based on the best available information we have. Now, if something major changes, we adjust up or down, but,
right,
we're estimating today for what September is gonna be. And then we'll find out for real what it is, between September and May.
right. Because it takes quite a while to shed,
Fully, yes.
to shed in budgetary terms an FTE.
Right. But there's, and, we have a long enough history that it tends to go like this and then down, like throughout the year. That's how charter school counts, and they're pretty consistent. So we can model it pretty well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank
Here,
you, thank you.
I went back, I didn't have a slide showing each individual, like by union budgeted. They're all flat over the financial plan except for the teachers. The financial plan does show within the general fund a decrease in each year. And so that's why it slightly drops,
Got it.
not just this federal stimulus, but also,
All right.
a little bit more beyond that.
All right, thank you.
And I went the wrong way. Then just finally, we touched upon transportation, but expenditures total 53.6 million in the draft budget, and increase 58.6 over the financial plan, or about 10%. The number of bus runs are 460 in 22-23. As I said, this is reduced from the pre-pandemic level of 670 runs. There is a severe shortage of both drivers and bus aides. The draft budget decreases transportation expenditures over the prior fiscal year adopted budget by 7.6 million, or 12.7%, based on the district's current level of transportation services. And then this bottom little table here just matches up the transportation expenditures along with the New York State aid. So there's a, it shows the direct connection between those two. The district receives about an 87% reimbursement for eligible New York State transportation aids in the following year's transportation aid. So the expenses from year one and year two, they get 87% of it back of eligible expenditures. Did want to take a quick look at the Special Projects Fund. This includes all of the federal stimulus funds as well as the standard grants that the district receives. Categorical grants are 14 million. That's the New York State Universal Pre-K grant. All of the grants are a mixture of foundational grants, federal grants, Title I funding, some state funding. And then in year 1 and 2 is the federal disaster relief. In total, $228.4 million in year 1 and 2, and then nothing in year 3 and 4. And then categorical grants and all other grants are flat at at 14 and 99.3 million in each fiscal year of the financial plan.
Thank you, Nathan.
Yep.
Jeanette, would you like to
I'll wrap it
do
up.
the conclusions? That would be great.
Sure, sounds good. So overall, the financial plan is balanced, but only with a significant draw or use of fund balance of roughly 90 million. The financial plan includes estimates for unsettled labor contracts, which is a substantial revision from past practice, where that hasn't been included before. So the amount for unsettled labor contracts is 131 million included in the financial plan, and it directly correlates with the use of fund balance within the financial plan. Fund balance, of course, is a non-recurring funding source, and it is indicative of structural imbalance. That being said, Secretary Floss, part of it would be retroactive costs as well, so we just don't know what's what at this point. Next slide, please. A significant risk to the plan, which has been touched on by your questions, is the enrollment figures. There's an assumption that enrollment returns to pre-pandemic levels over the financial plan. a lot of the aids are based on population and student numbers, enrollment numbers. So there's an inherent risk that if that number is too high, there could be an impact on revenues. Again, 172 million of cumulative increase in foundation aid, of which enrollment is a big driver in that calculation, is included in the financial plan. The district plan recommends that the district plan itself recommends that a staffing and facilities plan be developed to right-size the district. We support that recommendation. We further recommend that the district consider having an independent demographic study conducted to understand population trends and changes. And that almost directly relates to your question earlier, Secretary Floss. Next slide, there's just a couple statistics on this one regarding state aid, but I think we went over that enough. Next slide, the foundation aid. So in addition to the 172 million of foundation aid that the district is receiving, there's 290 million of federal stimulus that's been awarded to the district, which is mostly reflected in the grants fund. So you don't see a tremendous impact in the general fund at all, except for an administrative amount of 16 million in the first 2 years. Of the $290 million award, 228 million remains and is included within this plan. Most stimulus-funded programs, just to kind of reemphasize this, it ends when the federal stimulus ends, with the exception of the ELT program, English Language Training Program, and a planned expansion to the summer school programs. The general fund includes $12 million in the years 3 and 4 to continue those two programs. The additional 326 positions that Nathan discussed that are added in years 1 and 2 are eliminated when funding ends. And as a reminder, ESSER 2 funding ends, must be spent by September 2023, and ESSER 3, September 2024. The plan continues to include the reduction of 6.5 teachers for every 100 students that transfer into charter schools, and it's equal to 9 million of a projected cost reduction. And finally, the district's financial plan does cite that likely over the financial plan, a gap plan will need to be developed. So understanding that the continued use of fund balance to fund recurring expenses will need to be addressed, that the district has cited that. Any questions?
Well, I just think we should recognize that the foundation aid and the work of our delegation to bring in additional monies to the schools is appreciated, and that's with the change in the foundation formula, should be very helpful to the city. I don't know, Jeff, is there anything else you'd like to say on the budget or anything else?
Not really. I mean, I think, you really said it. The foundation, the gap between what we were being paid and what the formula is about $100 million. So by the legislature, making that change to fully fund it, that on an annual basis, essentially, is going to bump us $100 million. So that really covers the issues, that the structural gap that we've had before. And, I did want to mention one thing. In our foundation aid calculation that I have in the 4-year plan, we didn't put growth in there. We are holding that flat. We're showing the the schools we're assuming are going to be higher, but we didn't want to put that into the formula for because we just don't know at this time. And it's a 3-year rolling average, so it kind of, it's tough to model it out exactly, but we're essentially flat with the student counts in the foundation aid formula. Over the course of the plan, until we know more. I think this fall will be pretty telling. If we start to find some of those students come back, and obviously depending on where the charters all fall in, that'll give us an indication of what we might need to do in the next budget year in terms of sort of recognizing that maybe the student loss that's already in there is going to stay. And if it is the case, then we have to look at all of our schools.
But you haven't taken into account any of the refugee populations that are projected to come here along with
Right,
their students.
yeah, we don't have kind of
Right.
any of that information at this point, and it has happened in the past. That we've gotten that.
As I know, there's supposed to be 500 Afghan families coming.
We're still way under
We're
for
still- yeah.
the original projection. It's been slower than expected.
It's been slower than
Feds
expected.
have been slow, yeah.
Right.
But
So,
that could help. So,
Usually when it comes, it's quick, like.
Right.
The next day you
Bam.
find out there's
Yeah.
7 more kids. So that's how it happened about 5 years ago.
yeah.
so just some of these enrollment trends in the charter school shift, is it kind of the classic, like we've seen across the country, because of the lockdowns or remote learning, parents are choosing for private schools, or in some cases charter schools, which had more hours, kind of, is that the general theme going on here, you think?
I'm sure that's some of it, you know,
Yeah.
I haven't seen, like, there's probably some parents that are homeschooling now, taking them totally out.
Okay.
That's a bit, you know, private schools certainly, they weren't closed, charters, you know, charter schools, when they open, there's always someone that's gonna wanna try them out, so, you know, the fact that there's more seats, you're gonna have growth there.
Naturally, okay.
And then the two that underperformed and didn't close, you know, if there's no mechanism to really close those schools down, then there isn't, you know, they don't have what was designed to be sort of a model to bring in charters, and if they fail, close them, you know, obviously this year, when 2 of them should have failed, you know,
Right.
they didn't fail, so I don't know if that's gonna change things long term too. Because we have had, you know, 4 schools closed in the last 6 or 7 years, and 2 more, and that does offset some of the growth. So we'll see what happens with those 2 schools.
And then also, I should know this, is the building aid based on a formula, is it like a 50-50 match, or how does that?
It's a 15-year, basically, the eligible spending on our buildings, it's a payment of like 98% of that over 15 years.
Okay,
So it's a rolling, you know, every year there's new ones that come on and there's
Okay.
ones that come off. And, you know, we model it, it probably won't drop as much as that, because I don't really have new growth in there, but I am kind of modeling out some drop off, because we are starting to see some drop off in the out years out of the way.
got it.
But it's difficult going more than a couple of years out, just because you just don't know the timing of when projects will be completed and so forth. So I generally try to model it to mirror a little bit with the debt. So as debt goes down, building aid should go down, and as debt goes up, building aid should go up. They're somewhat correlated.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you. Jeanette, any other comments?
No other comments?
Any other comments from the board? On the phone, Donna, Andy, anything?
I'm okay.
I don't want to feel you,
I'm good, thank you.
great. I don't want you to feel left out. That's good. And Jeff, thanks for coming for all of this. We appreciate you spending
Yes, nice to see you.
the hours with you, with us here. So thank you. We now move to review the Buffalo Urban Renewal Agency's 2022-2023 proposed budget and related four-year financial plan, along with the summary of the third quarter. Any changes made to the budget and financial plan pursuant to the approval of Borough's Board of Directors will be reviewed at our June meeting. A copy of the staff report of these items has been provided for you under tab 4 in your board book. Bryce, I think you're up again.
Yes, sir. And actually, I'd like to, before beginning this presentation, go back to Secretary Floss's question concerning the property tax rate and what the impact would be on other valued homes. So I did a couple quick calculations. So my initial example was a house of $250,000. So the year-to-year tax growth on that was $125 a year. The growth on a house assessed at $75,000 would be $38 year to year. For a house at $100,000, it'd be $50 year to year. And then for a house at $150,000, it'd be $75 a year growth year to year. So I just wanted to address that question when we had the time there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that just gives a better idea for those who might be out there watching what their actual property tax rate might be as opposed to $250,000 which may seem a little high for Buffalo.
So now I will briefly just comment on Bureau's third quarter. Year 47 program funds were released in December. So they received those dollars, are able to use them. There's no significant variance to expenditures through the third quarter. As of March 31st, they expended $10.4 million. Currently, they have 34 out of 40 positions filled. Salaries and fringe through the first three quarters totaled $2.6 million. Budget to actual revenues were actually below budget by $2.3 million. Expenditures over that time were actually below budget at $1.8 million. Really what's driving this is the drawdown from the subrecipients. Bureau is really restricted on when some of these dollars go out until the subrecipients put in an application to draw down the funds. And there has been some delays. Some of the subrecipients have run into delays on projects, and they're going longer due to supply chain. It's been a lot harder for them to get some of the materials they need for construction. And if there is a variance at year end, that will be addressed through additional drawdowns on the revenue side. So that, which is briefly moving on to the financial plan, the Bureau's 2022-23 budget and 23-26 financial plan. First, what I'd like to say is Bureau has not received their year 48 entitlement letter yet. Normally they receive the initial one in February and then a final mid-May. They haven't even received their initial. So their estimates were conservative in constructing this budget. So once they receive that letter, they will be reviewing the budget and making any changes, and then they'd have to go back to their board and to us as well. So we would expect to see a modification either at June or August reflecting these dollars. This letter will be important because it will be the first time capturing the increase of the census count. So in 2010, there was, after the 2010 census, there was a decrease in the amount of entitlement funds being received by Buffalo. Population's gone up, and we're waiting to see how this formula is going to work out and what, in addition, HUD will be providing to the city of Buffalo. So with that disclosure, I'd like to move on. So in addition to the entitlement funds, Bureau has actually received several other significant pots of money. We were familiar with the CARES Act, the CDBG CV they received last year, and then we had to do the budget modification, so they still have 8.2 out of 11.4 million, and that's included in this year's budget. In addition, through the city's ARPA dollars, they're receiving a couple additional grant pots. One is 12.3 million for the ARPA Affordable Housing Advancement Fund. There's also an additional 6 million through the city for the home-focused projects for ARPA dollars. And then there's 2 million for a health equity grant. In addition, they have 1.7 million in the financial plan for the lead hazard grant, and then there's 1.2 million for the emergency rental assistance program.
Just real quick on that, I thought ERAP was all extinguished.
The state portion was,
Yeah.
because that was the first call.
Yeah.
There are still portions of what Bureau itself received directly from the federal government.
Okay, so even so, like for the county, we gave our portion to OTDA to administer for us with the state, but Bureau got their own separate allocation even beyond that.
Correct.
Okay, got
They
it.
and they received that, and then, as you're aware, spend the state dollars down first, and then
Okay.
correct.
Got it.
So, on Bureau's perspective, they're working through it, but there will be a timeliness issue down the road. But they should be able to address it before we get to that point.
Okay.
So the out-year revenues, so a lot of these dollars are temporary. They're in the first 3 years of the financial plan. So the out-year revenues are budgeted conservatively with decreases attributed to spend downs of the outside grants I just mentioned, primarily the CDBG CV and the additional ARPA dollars provided on the city's behalf. So from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24, you'll see a decrease of 32.6%. Following year, it's a decrease of 15.5%, and then only a 2% decrease in fiscal year 26. These are unprecedented days for the amount of funding Bureau has right now. And you'll see in a moment. This is just the estimate of where they think they're going to go in regards to entitlement funds. Roughly 112,000, almost 113,000, increase of 68,000 on the CDBG dollars, 44,000 ESG. Potentially, I expect it to actually be higher. Similar snapshot, just where we think the dollars will be split between the city and Bureau. And as just a reminder, the ESG and the HOPWA, as emergency shelter grants and housing opportunities for people with AIDS, are handled solely by the city, whereas the CDBG and home funds are split between Bureau and the city. So the next slide here is a summary of the 4 years of the financial plan, revenues over expenditures with program costs and then the administrative planning costs broken out specifically. As I mentioned a moment ago, there was a significant drop-off in the revenue and corresponding expenditures over the financial plan. So fiscal year 23 is budgeted at $29 million. And a lot of that, the largest piece of that is the CDBG CV, the CARES Act funding that they were provided with in March of 21, that they're in the process of spending down. Follow that up, you have the CDBG amount of $6.9 million, and that increases roughly 2% annually. The current year proposal, as well as the out year amounts, do include prior year allocations. CDBG and home funds, if they're not all dispersed in that 1 year, they can always carry forward. So they utilize that going forward. And as we saw this past year, HUD didn't release the dollars until December, so Bureau utilized from July through the end of December prior year dollars for operational costs, which they're authorized to do. The next largest component is the combined home and the affordable housing ARPA funds. So that goes 6.3 million down to 5.5, down to 3.2 in the 2 out years. Home is 3.3 million fiscal year 23, and then there's a 2% increase across the 3 years of the financial plan, 3.4 million. Combined CDBG and home program is approximately 1.1 million a year, and then these other grants and rent and general fund dollars, including sales of property, go from 3.4 million down to 2.3, 1.6, and 1.3. And what that really is demonstrating is the spend down of these outside dollars. Program costs are going to correspond to when the revenues are drawn, or let me flip that. As the programs are expensed, program dollars are drawn down for those specific programs, so you can see those going down. Administrative and planning costs are fairly conservative at 4.1 million in fiscal year 23, and then dropping down to 3.7 million over the last 3 years of the financial plan. Bureau did build in some salary and fringe increases for salary and fringe over the financial plan. The current CBA expires at the end of June 22. So they're in the process of negotiating their next CBA, and that is reflected in their expenditure in the planning and admin costs over the financial plan. So CDBG has been budgeted in the amount 7.9 million. 5.7 of that is for program delivery. That can be broken down to 3.7 for the emergency loan program, 1.8 million for program delivery costs, and then 200,000 for the crime prevention program delivery, leaving a balance of 2.2 million available for administrative costs. Home has been budgeted in the amount of 3.6 million, 3.2 million that's for the home program delivery, 400,000 for administrative costs. The 3.2 million can be broken down for 3 million for the rehabilitation and new construction programs, and then roughly 100,000 both for the community housing development organizations and home program delivery costs. Administrative costs have not changed. The formula for calculating amount allowable for administrative costs have not changed. These are just the thresholds allowed based on the various buckets of federal entitlement dollars. So as I already mentioned, there are resources, including the first 3 years of the financial plan, for negotiating and settling a new contract between Bureau and local CSE 815. Bureau does include prior year allocations of CDBG and home funds in the current year, as well as out years of the financial plan. Revenue forecast is conservative in out the years, includes 2% in CDBG and home funds over the financial plan, and there is adequate funding for administrative costs. Bureau does not participate in the City of Buffalo's health insurance program. However, they did build in annual increases of 2%. Operational actuals, largely more due to staffing and not being at full staffing. Health insurance has been, the actuals have been under budget, so we're comfortable with those amounts. Bureau currently has 34 properties valued at about $3.2 million, so those are investments they're looking at selling to individuals that would like to develop. And they're currently still working on the neighborhood framework plan is ongoing, allows multiple stakeholders the ability to coordinate with each other and agree upon housing goals and objectives. Currently, well, the fiscal year 22 budget was adopted with 44 positions. However, 4 of those positions were moved to the city. They've included 41 positions in the proposed financial plan. Currently, they have 34 of those positions filled. And that brings me to the end of the Bureau presentation.
Thank you. Jeanette, any concluding remarks?
Just a couple. So the Bureau of Financial Plan's balanced. I think you picked up on that from the comments. I'm not going to go over Bryce's comments again on the HUD final award letter. Our only couple additional comments would be that we continue to recommend monitoring of recurring revenues and grants. Of course, that's how borough is funded and that's how they do their work. But we also recommend close monitoring of the one-time federal stimulus programs, as there's no provision to carry forward unused dollars. They have to be committed by the end of 2024 and spent by December 31st, 2026. They're not really adding new employees, so we just would want that to be monitored. And that's it.
Okay, great.
And I'll just toss in, when it comes to the ARPA stuff, Congress has almost swept all this money a couple times now. There's been an increase in talk of it yet again. So I think it behooves everyone to lock it in as fast as they can so they can say it's committed. I've been looking at ways to do that for the county, and I think city, BMHA, everyone who got ARPA money, especially SLRF money, should take a look at locking it in as committed, because Congress is looking at it for other stuff.
Right. I think that's important, and working together too to try to get the biggest bang for the buck from all of these.
Yeah, at least from our national association, NACO, they emphasized, again, once it's committed, they don't think it'll get swept. So once you can say it's committed, I'm sure National League of Cities, their lobbying team probably has the same analysis, I'm guessing.
Alrighty, any other comments? If not, let's move on to review the BMHA and their final 2022-2023 budget and related four-year financial plan. The BFSA's reports on these items are under tab 5 in your board book. Nathan, glad to have you back.
Thank you. Good to be back. So the following is a brief overview of the BMHA's fiscal year 2022-23 adopted budget and adopted 23 through 26 financial plan. Both documents were approved by their Board of Commissioners back on April 21st. So the financial plan includes all 4 of the individual budgets and financial plans, COCC, the Section 8, Marine Drive, and the largest component, which is the AMP budget financial plan. The analysis that we have here shows it on both a consolidated basis as well as by each individual budget. So taking a look at the consolidated budget and financial plan, total revenues are about 55 million in 22-23, an increase to 58.5 in year 4. Expenses are 52.5, an increase to 53.8 in year 4. On a consolidated basis, there is net operating income before debt service in each year, combined totaling $14.2 million. After factoring in the debt service payment and then backing out the annual $1.6 million non-cash OPEB accrual, which is included within the expenses, the 22-23 cash impact is about $2 million, and then the overall is 12.6. There is an adjustment that BFSA recommends being made that we'll discuss that, but essentially the Section 8 budget underestimates expenditure, so that number looks to be a little bit high. Well, the total cash impact would be about 11.1 if we back that out. So the consolidated revenues here, the biggest component is the HUD subsidy. That is $21.3 million in 22-23. That increases about 9.3% over the financial plan, rather. The second largest rate of increase is with the HUD housing choice vouchers, which increase 8.8 over the same time frame. So the two big federal buckets are the largest areas of increase in the consolidated budget. Overall, revenues increase 3.6 or 6.6% over the financial plan. With expenses, expenses are $52.5 million in 22-23, an increase 2.5% or 1.3 over the 4 years. There is some changing within the personnel, so I have it shown here what the adopted budget is for this year, what the current makeup of the personnel staff is, and how it looks in the adopted budget and the financial plan. So be an increase of 10 positions overall, including 5 within executive. Those include an assistant executive director, a communications position, a marketing manager, a paralegal, and a management assistant. So total salaries and benefits are budgeted at 15.8 in 22-23, an increase to about 16.4 over the financial plan, based on the contracts, the labor contracts, individual contracts, and then factoring in the new positions. So taking a look at the individual budgets and financial plans, we look at AMP first. AMP is the largest, and it funds the 22 asset management programs. Revenues are, we can boil it down to just the cash impact. There's net operating income in every single fiscal year of the financial plan. The total impact is 15.8. It's the reason why, on a consolidated basis, there is positive operating income overall. Backing out, or paying for debt service, backing out the OPEB accrual, the next year's cash impact is $2.4 million, and then $13 million overall combined over the 4 years. Moving on to COCC, this is the business component of BMHA. It operates as a property management company, essentially. It's supported through the fees, the administrative and management fees for administering the Section 8 program, the AMP program. BMHA has budgeted a net operating loss of about $400,000 in 22-23. Again, after backing out the debt service payment and then paying for debt service and backing out the non-cash OPEB accrual, it comes down to about $100,000. So it's about $100,000 overall as well, combined over the 4 years.
So, our concerns about the management company and their ability to turn over vacant units, has that been addressed? Have we looked at any of that? I just think of our friend George Arthur and how important he knew that was to the individuals that are living in a lot of these places. Do we know anything?
Sure. I can tell you that the AMP occupancy rate, so I don't know the occupancy rate for Marine Drive or some of the other ones, but it's close to 95% when you exclude the two big properties that don't have the ability to have people right now. BMHA has to look at what's going on within the units now that the moratoriums are lifted. So that's something that's going to be reported on soon and that BMH is looking at. So they're looking at the rents. They don't know where to forecast them because they don't really know what's going to happen.
Well,
with that.
and this may come back to our original question, is that our concerns were that they weren't turning over those vacancies fast enough.
Right.
And that given that there's now going to be even additional pressure on them, I think we need to make sure that we continue to monitor that.
Sure. Okay, so moving on to Marine Drive, this is a redder slide than the other ones. And the reason being is that there's operating income loss in all four financial years, all four fiscal years rather. It's at a budget level, 300,000 in 22-23, and a combined million over the 4-year financial plan. The cash impact is $1.8 million. So there is an operating loss in next year's budget and within each fiscal year. If such losses are, if they occur, they would be potentially funded through COCC, current year operations, and/or reserves to the extent that they could be. However, we discussed this with BMHA management, and they do have a couple items that they're working on to address this. And both require New York State approval. The first is at Marine Drive to increase the flat rents. So if they're able to get approval to increase the amount, the flat rents per the units, they would have more revenue per year. The estimate given to us would be $250,000 annually in net dwelling income. The second item would be to designate Marine Drive apartments as a project-based voucher and potentially steer $800,000 to Marine Drive. I just want to be clear that that would come out of Section 8, so it wouldn't be additional voucher dollars. It would just mean a designation of Section 8 dollars to Marine Drive to help their operations. So they 7.8 million or 7.7 million next year. If that went through, it would still be 7.7 in Section 8 in revenue and expenses, but they would be funding operations at Marine Drive as well.
Do you know which one of the two is more likely to happen?
That I do not. I know that Modesto seemed very optimistic about both going through, and he said as soon as 23, 24. But I don't lay odds.
So what would the average rent increase be to cover the $250,000? Do you know?
I think he said to 40% from 35. I don't want to misspeak.
I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't
We
know
got
the
a
exact
schedule.
number.
I know what the current flat rate, I don't know what the proposed flat rate increase was though.
Yeah, it was more
Off
the
the top of my head.
aggregate that he said that their internal estimate would be.
Right.
So is it going to be $25? Is it going to be $500?
We can get a proposed
Yeah.
rent schedule for you.
No, that's great. I mean, I think there's a difference between the two, particularly given the number of elderly people at Marine Drive that are on fixed incomes.
Mm-hmm.
That it would be important for us to make sure that it was still affordable for them.
That was really why he was kind of pushing this project voucher-based program, because it would allow the low-income folks to be swept into that program, and then
Right.
they would be able to charge market rate for the non-low-income people, and that would,
Okay,
Okay.
it
got
would
it.
be a brand-new kind of revenue.
Okay.
So that makes a lot more sense. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And then the final budget and financial plan is the Section 8. It's 7.7 million in revenues and expenses in 22-23. We just know in our report that it's largely a pass-through fund, so the housing choice vouchers are received and then they're passed along to residents through the PHA payment. So you know, years 2, 3, and 4 have increasing revenues but flat expenses. The expenses are going to go up because they're going to be, you know, if they receive $8.4 million in year 4, the expenses are probably going to be about 8.4, not 7.7. It doesn't impact the consolidated financial plan really. It just passes through, but we noted that it looks to be underestimated in those years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for David? Jeanette, for I guess the last time today, if you can go through your conclusions, that would be great.
Thank you. On a consolidated, the plan's balanced, but on a segment basis, there's 2 segments that could cause some fiscal stress to the organization going forward. Before I talk about those, though, the Section 8 balances. BMHA receives the vouchers, they pay the vouchers out. Over this financial plan, they're showing 1.5 million of income over the financial plan. So our recommendation is, again, it's a repeat recommendation that segment balanced to 0 in the financial plan, so that when it doesn't skew the financial results when we're looking, or anybody's looking at the plan on a consolidated basis. Thank you. So there's 2 segments that are not balanced. One is the central office cost center. Net loss is 2.1 million. Didn't add a bullet point for it. The net loss is 2.1 million. The cash impact projected is less than 100,000. So we're comfortable that it won't probably even need reserves, but there's enough reserves on hand to manage that cash need over the next 4 years. As the AMPs move into a more profitable type area too, the central office would be able to begin getting management fees from the AMPs. So right now they're not getting that revenue source. So there's something that could potentially be, but for a conservative standpoint, that was not built into the revenue estimates for this financial plan. The second segment, which is more problematic and we talked about, is Marine Drive. Modesto Candelario, the Deputy Executive Director, thought that around July is when they would get a response from New York State about the project-based vouchers. So in the event that that falls through, there's not a lot they can do with Marine Drive. Any deficits are funded through central office. Central office doesn't have a lot left either, about 1.1 million, so it could become a problem. We are monitoring it.
What's the legal flexibility there?
Any deficit is required to be funded by the city of Buffalo.
Okay.
We talked about, let's see, where am I? The Section 8, we talked about that. Moving down to collective bargaining units, Nathan touched on the fact that salary increases are included over the financial plan. So those are 2% increases are built into the financial plan. The final slide is the risks to the plan, which is they did build in an operating subsidy proration estimate of 100%. If that was to be lower than 100%, their subsidy would decrease and they'd get less revenue for their AMPs. There's also a $1.2 million amount of additional subsidy projected over each year of the financial plan. This was a program that was offered. BMHA applied for it. They got it. It's to bring the AMPs reserves up to a minimum of 4 months. So any housing unit that had reserves that were under 2 months were allowed to apply for this program. BMHA applied, they got into it, so now they're getting $1.2 million a year until they build their reserves up to a 4-month, reserve balance. After that, the $1.2 million fades away, goes away. So potentially year 3 and 4, they won't be getting that $1.2 million. We consider that a mitigated risk, though, as it's intended to bring a certain minimum level of financial stability to the AMPs to begin with. So And that summarizes the comments.
Great. Are there any other comments? Thank you, Nathan. We've now completed our review of the financial plans as submitted to the authority in accordance with the requirements of the BFSA Act. We have no other actions today. The approval of the final budgets and financial plans will be considered at the June 22nd meeting. Is there any new business? Not hearing any other items, discussions?
This is Donna. Just thank you again for all your hard work.
Well, no, thank you, Donna. You've made our life so much easier over the long number of years that you've worked here with us, and we really appreciate everything that you've done.
Yeah, Donna, good luck and congratulations.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
well deserved, I must say. So that's great. Before,
You already have your last,
yeah,
My last what?
did you already have your last day, or when is that?
Probably we'll finish, finish up the budget and then next week get it ready for printing and that'll be it.
well,
That's my goal.
Okay, well,
so we
Good for
expect
you.
you to come as a visitor to every control board meeting going forward now.
Okay.
who's your, re-
I'll be one of your
who's your
visitors.
replacement?
Yes. Well,
Who's your
thank you.
replacement gonna be, any idea?
Not yet. That's why I've been kind of hanging out a little longer.
Okay, well, at least you'll be off for the summer.
Yeah,
Time of
it'll be
year.
nice. Thank you.
Well, great. So before we close, are there any comments from the audience? We want to make sure that everyone knows that they can address the board at the end of any meeting. And so, seeing no one rushing to come to the podium, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
As
So
moved.
moved.
Okay, thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.